The darkness of space stretched endlessly before Commander Ju Park as she stood on the bridge of the Resilience. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped the command rail, watching Earth shrink on the main view screen. 200 years of human civilization, reduced to a fading blue dot. "Status report," she demanded, her voice steady despite the weight on her shoulders. Lieutenant Minho Kim looked up from his console. "All 300 ships accounted for, Commander. 14 million souls. We're the last." Ju closed her eyes briefly. The last humans to see Earth. The thought seemed impossible even now. "Plot course beyond the galactic rim," she ordered. "Maximum speed once we clear the Kuiper Belt." The bridge crew worked silently. They all knew what was at stake. 6 months ago, humanity had made first contact with the Concordat, an alliance of 17 spacefaring species that controlled most of the Milky Way. Initial diplomatic exchanges had been promising, until the Concordat Council completed their species assessment. Humans were deemed unpredictably dangerous and evolutionarily unstable. Their tendency toward rapid technological advancement combined with their competitive nature made them a level 1 threat to galactic stability. The verdict had been unanimous. Humans must be contained. When Earth's governments refused to accept Concordat authority, the ultimatum came swiftly: exile or extinction. The Concordat demonstrated their power by effortlessly neutralizing Earth's defensive systems and destroying the moon colony as a warning. "Commander," called out Communications Officer Sunwoo, interrupting her dark thoughts. "Concordat vessels are establishing positions around the solar system. They're deploying something." The view screen shifted to show hundreds of alien ships positioning strange devices at regular intervals throughout the system. "Quarantine beacons," explained Science Officer Doyen, studying the sensor readings. "They're creating a containment field around the entire solar system." Juwoo's jaw tightened. "They're making sure nothing gets in or out." In the 6 months since the ultimatum, humanity had built as many starships as possible, equipped with experimental faster-than-light drives. Not everyone had managed to evacuate. Billions remained on Earth, now cut off forever from the stars. "Incoming transmission," Sunwoo announced, from the Concordat flagship. Juwoo straightened her uniform. On screen, the alien that appeared was humanoid, but distinctly not human. Blue-tinted skin, 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, and tentacle-like appendages framing its face. "This is High Marshal Dren of the Concordat Security Force," it said, its words translated by the ship's computer. "Your species' quarantine is now in effect. Return to Earth immediately or be destroyed." Juwoo stepped forward. "This is Commander Ju Park of Earth Alliance Vessel Resilience. We exercise our right to leave peacefully. We seek no conflict with the Concordat." The alien's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Your destination." "We go where we choose," she replied firmly. "Beyond your jurisdiction." "Be warned," Dren said, his tone coldening. "The void beyond the rim is uncharted for a reason. Nothing survives there. Return to your world while you can." The screen went dark before Juwoo could respond. Lieutenant Minho looked up. "They're powering weapons systems." "Evasive pattern Delta," ordered Juwoo calmly. "All ships prepare for synchronized jump on my mark." The fleet's new jump drives were untested at this scale, but they had no choice. As the Concordat ships moved to surround them, Juwoo gave the order: "Jump." 300 ships vanished simultaneously into the darkness, leaving behind only the fading signature of their engines. 5 years passed in the void between galaxies. The human fleet traveled farther than any known species, surviving on carefully rationed supplies and hydroponics. They lost 37 ships to technical failures and cosmic phenomena. Each loss cut deeply, as every human life was now precious beyond measure. On a small dwarf galaxy beyond the Milky Way's rim, they found their salvation: planets suitable for terraforming, resources to build, and most importantly, isolation from the Concordat. The humans called their new home Haven. Within 50 years, They had established colonies on 7 planets. Within a century, 20 worlds bore human settlements. Their technology advanced at a remarkable pace, driven by necessity and the burning desire to one day return to Earth. Meanwhile, in the grand chambers of the Concordat Central Authority, junior diplomat Neri stood nervously before her supervisor. As a member of the Talon species, known for their analytical minds, she had been assigned to historical categorization, a polite term for filing away closed cases. You requested access to the human quarantine files. Director Volk asked, his ridge-lined face showing disapproval. Neri bowed her head slightly. Yes, Director. For archival purposes. The matter is settled, he replied dismissively. The humans are contained. In a few generations, they will regress to a pre-technological state or die out entirely. Their file is closed. Of course, Director, she said. I simply noticed irregularities in the original assessment that. Irregularities. The director's tone sharpened. Their adaptability ratings, Neri continued carefully. They exceed any species we've encountered. The probability calculations for their extinction may be flawed. Director Volk rose from his seat. The Council's decision is final. Do not pursue this further. Later that night, alone in her quarters, Neri accessed the restricted files using an authorization code she'd memorized. The data scrolled before her, detailed analyses of human physiology, psychology, and history. Something didn't add up. The Concordat had encountered over 300 species, but none had been treated with such immediate severity. A hidden note in the file caught her attention, a warning from the first contact team. Caution. Humans advance technologically at geometric rates when facing extinction-level threats. Had the Council actually created the very danger they feared? As if answering her question, an alert flashed on her screen. A classified notification meant only for high-level officials. Neri hesitated only briefly before opening it. Anomalous energy signatures detected at monitoring station 47C beyond rim sectors. Pattern matches no known species except. The document ended abruptly, but Neri felt a chill. She pulled up a star chart and located station 47C. It was positioned at the furthest edge of Concordat space, facing the darkness beyond the galactic rim, where the humans had disappeared 200 years ago. The alarm on monitoring station 47C blared for the 3rd time that cycle. Officer Markle, a veteran of the Concordat Border Service, silenced it with a frustrated tap. Another false reading? Asked his junior officer. Must be, Markle replied, rubbing his scaled forehead. Nothing exists out there but void. He was wrong. As he reset the system, the sensors lit up again, hundreds of energy signatures appearing simultaneously at the edge of detection range. Then thousands. Contact Central Command, Markle ordered, his voice suddenly tense. Now. Across Concordat space, similar reports flooded in from a dozen border stations. Something massive was emerging from the darkness beyond the rim. Admiral Junho Lee stood on the command deck of the Terran flagship Retribution, watching as the fleet emerged from the jump points. His white uniform bore the golden emblem of the Terran Commonwealth, Earth surrounded by 7 stars, representing their core worlds. All battle groups report successful transit. Admiral, reported his tactical officer. 23,000 ships present and accounted for. Junho nodded, his weathered face showing no emotion despite the historical significance of the moment. His great-grandparents had been among the original exiles. Now, after 2 centuries of preparation, humanity had returned. Open channels across all Concordat frequencies, he ordered. The communications officer nodded. Channel open. Sir. Junho straightened his back and spoke clearly. This is Admiral Junho Lee of the Terran Commonwealth Fleet. We have returned to reclaim our homeworld. We seek peaceful resolution, but we will not be denied. We request immediate communication with the Concordat High Council. The message was transmitted simultaneously from all 23,000 ships, in all 17 languages of the Concordat species. On the Concordat capital world, The High Council gathered in emergency session. The chamber buzzed with alarmed conversations as counselors from all 17 species took their seats. High Commander Zurich slammed his ceremonial staff against the floor for silence. This is impossible. The humans couldn't have survived beyond the rim, let alone returned with such force. The view screen showed tactical displays of the human fleet. Their ships were unlike anything in Concordat records, sleek vessels with technology that defied analysis. Neri, now elevated to junior counselor due to her knowledge of human history, stood to address the chamber. Her voice was steady despite her nervousness. "We severely underestimated them," she stated. "The humans didn't just survive. They thrived. Preliminary analysis suggests they've built a civilization in what appears to be a dwarf galaxy they've terraformed. Their technology has advanced beyond our own in several key areas." "How many ships?" demanded Counselor Thax of the Vortis species. "Our count shows over 23,000 vessels of various classes," Neri replied. "Their firepower is difficult to quantify. Our sensors cannot identify many of their systems." The chamber erupted in panicked discussion. "We must strike immediately," shouted High Marshal Dren, descendant of the commander who had overseen the human quarantine. "Destroy them before they consolidate their position." "With what?" countered another counselor. "Our combined fleet numbers only 18,000 vessels, and we don't know their capabilities." As the council argued, a direct transmission came through on the priority channel. The screen filled with the image of Admiral Chunho Lee. "Greetings, Concordat Council," he said calmly. "I trust you've received our message. We await your response." Zurich stepped forward. "This is High Commander Zurich. Your presence here violates the Quarantine Treaty. Return beyond the rim immediately." Shunho's expression didn't change. "There is no treaty. There was only an ultimatum, forced upon us without negotiation. We've come to correct that historical error." "You have no standing here," Dren interrupted. "Your species was deemed a threat to galactic stability. And yet here we are," Juno replied mildly, "having built a thriving civilization without conflict, while you prepare for war at our mere appearance. Which of us is truly the threat?" Before Dren could respond, Juno continued. "We have established positions near every major Concordat world. We could have attacked without warning. Instead, we announce ourselves and request dialogue. Consider what that means about our intentions." The display shifted to show the human fleet's distribution. They had indeed positioned themselves strategically throughout Concordat space, a feat that should have been impossible without detection. "How did you penetrate our defense network?" demanded Zurich. "We've had 200 years to study your technology," Juno answered. "Your network hasn't fundamentally changed in that time. Your species grow complacent without competition." Neri stepped forward cautiously. "Admiral Lee, what precisely are your demands?" "The removal of the quarantine around Earth, recognition of the Terran Commonwealth as a sovereign power, and guarantees of non-interference with human development moving forward." The demands were surprisingly moderate, given their apparent military advantage. Neri glanced at her fellow counselors, seeing the calculation in their eyes. Perhaps diplomacy was still possible. High Marshal Dren had other ideas. As the council deliberated, he secretly ordered a battle group to engage the human ships nearest the Proxima system. The Concordat vessels opened fire without warning. What happened next stunned those watching. The human ships made no effort to evade. Instead, the energy weapons seemed to dissipate harmlessly against invisible barriers surrounding the vessels. The human response was measured. Rather than destroying the attackers, they employed some unknown technology that disabled the Concordat ship's weapons and propulsion systems, leaving them intact but helpless. Admiral Chunho's face reappeared on the council's screen. His expression was still calm, but colder now. "That was unwise," he stated simply. "We could have destroyed them completely. Remember that when we continue our discussion." The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Neri finally spoke what many were thinking. We need to negotiate. We cannot win this conflict. Surrender to humans, sputtered Dren. Unthinkable. Not surrender, she replied firmly. Coexistence. They've demonstrated both superior technology and restraint. Those aren't the actions of the savage species you've described for centuries. As the council argued, more reports came in. Human representatives had appeared on dozens of worlds, requesting meetings with local authorities. They'd brought trade proposals, technological offerings, and most disturbingly, historical records proving the Concordat's initial assessment of humanity had been deliberately falsified. The political order that had stood for millennia began to fracture. Some species welcomed the humans cautiously, while others prepared for war. The galaxy that had known unchanging stability for generations now faced its greatest challenge: the return of humanity, and the truth they brought with them. Neri adjusted her ceremonial robes nervously as the airlock cycled open. The council had appointed her as official liaison to the humans, a role she had neither sought nor expected. Standing beside her, High Marshal Dren seemed tense, his four-fingered hand resting near his ceremonial weapon. Remember, Dren whispered, they are unpredictable and dangerous. Admit nothing. Promise nothing. The inner door slid open to reveal Commander Yunahan of the Terran Diplomatic Corps. She was shorter than Neri had expected, with dark hair pulled back neatly and eyes that seemed to assess everything at once. Welcome aboard the Harmony, Yuma said, bowing slightly. I'm Commander Yunahan, diplomatic liaison for the Commonwealth. Neri returned the bow. I am Counselor Neri of the Talon. This is High Marshal Dren. Dren merely nodded stiffly. The human vessel was surprisingly comfortable, with design elements that seemed to blend functionality with natural forms. As they walked to the conference room, Neri noticed Dren studying everything with suspicious eyes. Your ship is quite elaborate, Dren said, his tone suggesting he found it wasteful. Yuna smiled. We believe environments should nourish the spirit as well as serve function. 200 years in the void taught us the importance of beauty in daily life. The conference room featured a circular table with no obvious head position, a deliberate design choice, Neri realized. Admiral Junvo Lee was waiting, standing as they entered. Thank you for coming, he said. This meeting is long overdue. The discussions began formally, with both sides restating their positions. The humans wanted Earth's quarantine lifted and recognition as a sovereign power. The Concordat representatives emphasized caution and gradual normalization of relations. When they broke for refreshments, Dren was called away for an urgent communication. Neri found herself alone with Commander Yuna. May I ask you something directly? Neri ventured. Of course, Yuna replied, pouring a steaming beverage for each of them. Why did you really return? You've built successful colonies elsewhere. Your commonwealth seems prosperous. Why risk conflict for a world most of your people have never seen? Yuna considered the question carefully. Have you ever been separated from your home against your will? Neri shook her head. Earth isn't just a planet to us. It's the cradle of our species. Our music, our art, our literature. They're filled with Earth's landscapes. Our oldest stories are set beneath its sky. Yuna's eyes grew distant. For 200 years, we've told our children about blue oceans and green forests they might never see. We've preserved Earth's life forms from genetic samples. We've maintained its languages and cultures. She looked directly at Neri. We don't seek revenge for our exile, but we will reclaim our birthright. The Council fears you'll seek retribution once established, Neri admitted. Yuna shook her head. If we wanted vengeance, we wouldn't have announced our arrival. We wouldn't have disabled rather than destroyed those ships that attacked us. The conversation shifted as they discussed their respective worlds. Neri found herself drawn to Yuna's directness and intelligence. This human was nothing like the dangerous savages described in Concordat records. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the political situation deteriorated. High Marshal Dren had been building a coalition of hardliners who believed humanity must be contained at any cost. In a closed session, he addressed his supporters. "The humans' so-called peaceful overtures are a deception," he declared. "While they distract us with diplomacy, they position their forces throughout our territory. We must act decisively." One of the gathered officials spoke up. "The Council has not authorized military action." Dren's expression hardened. "The Council has grown weak and indecisive. Sometimes necessary actions require bypassing bureaucracy." On a remote outpost near the edge of Concordat space, a small human settlement had been established as a trading post. Only 300 humans lived there, exchanging technology and cultural artifacts with curious local species. Without warning, a battle group of 5 Concordat warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and surrounded the outpost. "Attention, human settlement," transmitted the Concordat commander. "You are in violation of quarantine protocols. Surrender immediately." Inside the outpost control center, Administrator Jae-hyun looked at his security chief with concern. "Contact Commonwealth Command. Tell them we're facing hostiles." Before they could respond, the Concordat ships opened fire, targeting the outpost's minimal defenses. The humans had seconds to activate emergency protocols before the bombardment hit. What happened next would be debated in Concordat strategic circles for years to come. Instead of being destroyed, the human outpost shimmered with an iridescent field that absorbed the weapon's fire completely. From beneath the outpost, previously hidden defensive systems emerged, sleek, automated platforms that moved with impossible speed. These platforms fired no weapons. Instead, they simply approached each Concordat vessel and projected similar fields around them. One by one, the attacking ships went dark, their systems completely disabled but their crews unharmed. The entire engagement lasted less than 5 minutes. Back on the diplomatic vessel, Admiral Juno received the report during negotiations. His expression remained neutral as he listened through his earpiece, but Commander Yuna's face showed momentary concern. "Is something wrong?" Nari asked, noticing the change. Junho nodded to Yuna, who addressed the room. "We've just received word that 5 Concordat warships attacked our trading outpost in the Paraxis sector. There were no casualties on either side. The attacking vessels have been neutralized but not damaged." Dren's face revealed nothing, but Nari noticed his hand tighten around his stylus. "This is most disturbing," said one of the Concordat delegates. "We have issued no such orders." "The ships bore high command insignia," Yuna replied, displaying images on the conference room screen. "They identified themselves as acting under Concordat authority." All eyes turned to Dren, who rose from his seat. Perhaps some commanders took initiative to enforce the still active quarantine protocols. "I will investigate immediately." After Dren left, the atmosphere in the room changed. The human delegates shared knowing glances with each other, while the remaining Concordat representatives looked increasingly uncomfortable. Later that evening, Nari found herself sharing a meal with Yuna in the humans' private quarters. The diplomatic protocols called for cultural exchange, but the conversation had become surprisingly personal. "Your people aren't what I expected," Nari admitted. "The historical records describe humans as aggressive and unpredictable." Yuna smiled. "We can be, but we're also curious, compassionate, and adaptable. Your Concordat saw only what it feared in us. And now," Yuna said, her expression serious, "we need to prevent those who profit from fear from derailing peace. Dren ordered that attack today. We both know it." Nari sighed. "I suspect you're right, but proving it will be difficult, and he's not alone in his views." As political tensions escalated across Concordat space, humans and aliens who had never expected to meet began forming unexpected connections. On dozens of worlds, the narrative of dangerous humans began to crumble in the face of actual interaction. The galaxy stood at a crossroads, with the possibility of either a new era of cooperation or a devastating conflict. And in the middle of it all, Relationships like the one forming between Nari and Yuna offered a glimpse of what might be possible. Admiral Junho Lee stood before the holographic display in the Retribution's war room. Around him gathered his most trusted commanders, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of Earth's solar system. "The quarantine beacons are our primary target," Junho said, pointing to the red dots surrounding Earth's orbit. 200 of these devices form an impenetrable barrier around our homeworld. We disable them, we gain access. Commander Yunahan frowned. "Our intelligence suggests High Marshal Dren has positioned 40% of the Concordat fleet around Earth. He expects this move." "Of course he does," Junho replied with a slight smile. "Which is why we won't do what he expects." For weeks, diplomatic talks had stalled. While some Concordat species favored peaceful relations, Dren's faction had gained influence by stoking fears about human intentions. Meanwhile, human ships had carefully mapped the quarantine network around Earth, searching for weaknesses. In her quarters aboard the Concordat diplomatic vessel, Nari reviewed the latest council decisions with growing concern. The political balance was shifting. Species that had initially welcomed human contact were now hesitating as Dren's propaganda spread. Her personal communication device chimed. A message from Yuna requesting an urgent meeting at an unusual location. Nari hesitated only briefly before agreeing. They met on a small observation deck overlooking the stars. Yuna was already there when Nari arrived, gazing out at the distant pinpoints of light. "Thank you for coming," Yuna said without turning around. "I wasn't sure you would." "Your message said it was important," Nari replied, joining her at the viewport. "Though meeting like this is unorthodox." Yuna turned to face her. "We're moving on Earth soon. The diplomatic approach has failed." Nari felt a chill. That would be a grave mistake. The Concordat will interpret any move toward Earth as an act of war. "We know," Yuna said quietly, "but we've discovered something you need to see." She handed Nari a small data device. "These are classified Concordat military communications. Dren has positioned more than just defensive forces around Earth." Nari accessed the data, her 4 eyes widening as she read. "This can't be right. The Council never authorized a Sunbreaker weapon. Yet there it is," Yuna said grimly. "A planet killer, hidden in the quarantine network. According to these files, Dren has standing orders to use it if humans approach Earth. Better a dead world than one reclaimed by humans." Nari read aloud from the document, her voice barely a whisper. "This is genocide. Now you understand why we can't wait for diplomacy," Yuna said. "If we don't act, Dren will either keep us from our home forever or destroy it entirely." The next day, without warning, human ships appeared at multiple points along the quarantine network. They used technology that created temporary blind spots in Concordat detection systems, allowing them to approach undetected. Dren's response was immediate. "All Concordat vessels, engage the human fleet. They must not breach the quarantine." The massive Concordat armada moved to intercept, exactly as Admiral Junho had predicted. But the human ships didn't engage. Instead, they retreated, drawing the Concordat forces away from their positions around Earth. "They're running," Dren said with satisfaction. "Pursue and destroy." His tactical officer looked uncertain. "Sir, they're splitting up, drawing our forces in multiple directions." "Then split our forces too," Dren ordered. "They cannot be allowed to regroup." What Dren failed to notice was the absence of the human flagship. As the Concordat fleet pursued the decoys, the Retribution, and a small group of specialized vessels approached Earth from the opposite direction, using the moon as cover. Aboard the Retribution, Junho watched the tactical display with intense focus. "Status of Operation Shadow. Teams are in position at 12 key beacon junctions," reported his tactical officer. "Awaiting your command." Junho nodded. "Begin the operation." Specialized human teams deployed from their ships, approaching the quarantine beacons with equipment designed to disable rather than destroy them. The beacons were interconnected, Disabling a few key nodes would create a gap large enough for ships to pass through. Meanwhile, Nari had taken the evidence of Dren's planet killer to the Concordat Council. An emergency session was called, with Dren ordered to attend. "These accusations are absurd," Dren declared when confronted. "The Sunbreaker is a defensive measure, approved through proper channels. No such approval exists in council records," countered the Talon representative. "Deployment of planet killers requires unanimous council consent." "These are extraordinary times," Dren argued. "The human threat requires extraordinary measures." As the council debated, alerts sounded throughout the chamber. "Human vessels detected near Earth quarantine perimeter," announced the security system. Dren's expression shifted to one of grim satisfaction. "You see, while we debate, they act. I must return to my command." Before anyone could stop him, Dren had left the chamber. Nari immediately contacted Yuna. "Dren is heading back to his command ship," she said urgently. "He'll activate the Sunbreaker as soon as he confirms you've breached the quarantine." "How much time do we have?" Yuna asked. "Minutes at most," Nari replied. "The council is divided. They won't stop him in time." Near Earth, the operation was succeeding. Human teams had disabled 7 key beacons, creating a growing gap in the quarantine field. The Retribution moved forward, becoming the first human ship to approach Earth in 2 centuries. Chunho stood at the view screen, emotions visible on his face for the first time as he gazed at the blue planet. "Prepare landing craft. I want boots on Earth within the hour." His tactical officer's voice interrupted the moment. "Admiral, we're detecting energy buildup in the quarantine network. Something's happening." On his command ship, Dren gave the order. "Activate the Sunbreaker. Target Earth." The massive weapon, disguised as part of the quarantine network, began to power up. Its design was simple but devastating. It would trigger a chain reaction in Earth's core, destroying the planet completely. "Weapon will reach critical power in 3 minutes, reported Dren's weapons officer. "No way to stop the sequence once initiated." Dren smiled coldly. "At least humans will have a clear view of their world's destruction." Aboard the Retribution, alarms blared as sensors detected the weapon's activation. "Sunbreaker confirmed," reported the science officer. "Energy readings suggest total planetary destruction capability." Chunho's expression hardened. "Deploy the Aegis system." "Sir, it's never been tested at this scale," his chief engineer protested. "We have no choice," Chunho replied. "Execute immediately." From the Retribution's hull, dozens of small satellites deployed, forming a precise pattern between the ship and Earth. Each began generating a field of energy that connected to the others, creating a shield unlike anything the Concordat had ever seen. The Sunbreaker fired, its devastating energy beam striking the human shield. For a terrifying moment, it seemed the shield might fail as it absorbed the immense power of the planet killer. Then, remarkably, the shield not only held but began redirecting the energy, channeling it safely away from Earth in a spectacular display of light and color visible across the solar system. In the Concordat Council chamber, representatives watched in stunned silence as their monitors showed what was happening. The humans had not only breached the quarantine, they had neutralized a weapon that had been thought unstoppable. And with that defensive act, the balance of power in the galaxy shifted irrevocably. The morning sun rose over the Korean peninsula for the first time in 200 years with human eyes there to witness it. Admiral Junho Lee stood on the shore, feeling the Earth's sand between his fingers. Behind him, landing craft continued to arrive, bringing the first human settlement team to their ancestral home. "It feels different than I imagined," he said quietly. Commander Yuna Han stood beside him, watching the waves. "Better or worse?" "Just different," he replied. "All my life I've dreamed of this moment. Now that it's here," his voice trailed off. "Now you're thinking about what comes next," Yuna finished for him. Across the galaxy, the Concordat Council remained in emergency session. The failed attempt to destroy Earth had shattered any remaining unity among the 17 species. High Marshal Dren had been arrested for exceeding his authority, though many still supported his actions. Neri stood before the council, completing her report. The humans have established a preliminary settlement on Earth. They've made no aggressive moves beyond disabling the quarantine network. And the weapon they used to counter the Sunbreaker? Asked the counselor. They call it the Aegis system, Neri explained. It appears to redirect energy rather than simply blocking it. Our scientists believe it represents technology at least a century beyond our own capabilities. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans could have used such technology offensively. Instead, they had revealed it only when necessary to prevent Earth's destruction. What are their demands now? Asked the council leader. Admiral Lee has requested to address the council directly, Neri replied. He wishes to present terms for a permanent peace. 2 days later, Admiral Chunho stood in the center of the Concordat Council chamber. The circular room felt tense, with representatives from all 17 species watching him intently. Thank you for agreeing to hear me, Chunho began. 200 years ago, your predecessors gave humanity an ultimatum: exile or extinction. We chose a third path. We survived. We grew. We advanced. And now we have returned. He paused, looking around the room. I could demand reparations. I could insist on punitive measures against those who sought our destruction. Instead, I offer something different. A holographic display activated behind him, showing images of human technological achievements, medical breakthroughs, environmental restoration systems, advanced energy production. The Terran Commonwealth proposes an alliance, not subjugation. Earth will return to human control, with open diplomatic relations with all willing Concordat species. We will share technological and cultural exchange. We will contribute to galactic stability rather than threaten it. Murmurs spread through the chamber. These terms were surprisingly moderate, given the humans' apparent military advantage. And what guarantees do we have that humanity won't seek expansion at our expense? Asked a representative from a species known for their warlike tendencies. Chunho nodded. A fair question. We propose joint oversight of military developments, mutual defense agreements, and open borders for trade and cultural exchange. We don't seek dominance. We seek partnership. The council debated for 3 days. Some species immediately supported alliance with humans, seeing opportunity in their advanced technology. Others remained suspicious, arguing for continued containment. In the end, pragmatism won out. The humans had demonstrated both their power and their restraint. Better to have them as allies than enemies. 6 months later, on a previously uninhabited world designated New Harmony, the first joint human Concordat colony was established. Yunahan and Neri were appointed as co-administrators, their friendship having blossomed during the crisis. They stood together on a hillside overlooking the new settlement, watching as buildings took shape using a combination of human and alien architectural styles. Did you ever imagine this outcome when you first found those restricted files? Yuna asked. Neri's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, the Talon equivalent of a smile. Never. I was simply curious about inconsistencies in the records. Curiosity is a trait our species share, Yuna noted. Perhaps that's why we get along so well. Below them, human and alien workers collaborated on construction projects. Children from both species played together in a newly established park, their laughter carrying on the breeze. There will still be challenges, Nari cautioned. Dren's supporters haven't given up. They've just gone quiet. We'll face those challenges together, Yuna replied confidently. On Earth, the restoration had begun. 2 centuries of absence had allowed nature to reclaim many human cities, but pollution and climate damage remained. Human environmental technology, developed during their exile, was now being deployed to heal their homeworld. Admiral Chunho, now appointed Earth Governor, welcomed a delegation of Concordat scientists to a research facility near the former city of Seoul. The building housed something special, a genetic repository containing samples of Earth's biodiversity, carefully preserved by the exiles. These are the seeds of Earth's future, Junho explained as the aliens examined the facility with interest. Plant and animal species that nearly went extinct. With your help, we can restore them faster. One of the alien scientists, a photosynthetic being named Thrill, extended a tendril toward a seedling. Your people kept these alive for 200 years, knowing you might never return. Hope is powerful, Juno replied simply. Throughout the galaxy, the story of humanity's return inspired both fear and admiration. Some saw it as a cautionary tale about underestimating potential rivals. Others viewed it as proof that cooperation yielded better results than conflict. Human technology began spreading through Concordat space. More efficient energy systems, advanced medical treatments, and faster transportation networks. In return, humans gained access to alien cultural and scientific achievements that had developed during their exile. The most visible symbol of the new era was the repurposed quarantine network. The same beacons that had once imprisoned Earth now served as a communication hub linking human and Concordat systems in an information exchange unprecedented in galactic history. 1 year after the return, a small ceremony took place on a Korean hillside. A simple monument was unveiled, bearing names of those who had led the original exodus, including Commander Ju Park of the Resilience. A human child named Hyun stood hand in hand with a young Talon named Ryan as the monument was dedicated. They were among the first children of the new generation, born into a galaxy where humans and aliens lived together. What was it like before humans came back? Hyun asked his friend. Ryan's 4 eyes blinked thoughtfully. My parents say the galaxy was quiet, predictable. And now? Now it's interesting, Ryan replied. My parent Neri says humans make everything interesting. As dusk fell, the 2 children looked up at the stars becoming visible in the darkening sky. No longer divided by fear or separation, their generation would grow up seeing possibilities the Concordat had never imagined. Behind them, Admiral Juno watched the children with satisfaction. The path forward would not be easy. Old prejudices would take generations to fade completely. But looking at the young human and alien standing together beneath the stars of Earth, he knew their return had been worth every sacrifice. Humanity had come home, and this time they had brought friends.